Captain Jake Thompson never thought his life would change forever on a Tuesday morning. He was just another soldier doing his job, flying his small space patrol ship through the empty regions of space. The mission was simple: check the outer planets for any signs of trouble and report back to Earth Command. Nothing exciting ever happened on these routine flights. But today was different. Jake's ship started making strange noises about 3 hours into his patrol. Warning lights flashed across his control panel like a Christmas tree. The engine was overheating, and his navigation system was going crazy. He tried everything he knew to fix it, but nothing worked. The ship was going down, and there was nothing he could do about it. "This is Captain Thompson calling Earth Command," he spoke into his radio. "My ship is failing. I'm going to crash land on the nearest planet." Static filled his ears. No response. He was completely alone. The planet below looked like a giant purple rock covered in strange crystal formations. Jake had never seen anything like it in all his years of space travel. The crystals glowed with a soft blue light, creating patterns across the planet's surface that looked almost like a heartbeat. His ship hit the ground hard. Jake felt his whole body shake as metal scraped against rock. When everything finally stopped moving, he found himself upside down in his pilot's seat, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. But he was alive. Jake crawled out of the wreckage and looked around. The air was thin, but breathable. The gravity felt normal, but everything else was completely alien. The crystal formations were everywhere, some as tall as buildings, others as small as flowers. They pulsed with that same blue light, and when Jake walked near them, he could hear a faint humming sound. "Well, this is just perfect," Jake muttered. To himself, his ship was completely destroyed. His radio was dead. He was stuck on a planet millions of miles from home with no way to call for help. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Jake knew he needed to find shelter before dark. He grabbed his emergency pack from the ship and started walking toward what looked like a cave entrance between two massive crystal pillars. As he walked deeper into the crystal cave, the humming sound got louder. It wasn't scary or threatening. It was almost musical, like a lullaby. The blue light from the crystals was bright enough to see by, so Jake didn't need to use his flashlight. The cave was bigger than he expected. It opened up into a huge underground chamber with crystal formations growing from the floor and ceiling. Some of the crystals were so clear they looked like glass, while others were cloudy and seemed to move with their own inner light. That's when Jake saw her. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. They're lying on a flat crystal surface. In the center of the chamber was a figure that looked almost human, but definitely wasn't. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow from within. Her hair was long and silver, and it actually sparkled like it was made of starlight. She was wearing clothes that looked like they were woven from liquid moonlight, but she was hurt, bad. Jake could see dark stains on her clothing. Blood, but not red like human blood. It was silver, like liquid metal. Her breathing was shallow and weak. Even though she was clearly not human, Jake could tell she was dying. "Hey," Jake called out softly, approaching slowly. "Can you hear me?" The alien woman's eyes fluttered open. They were the most beautiful eyes Jake had ever seen, deep purple with flecks of gold, like tiny stars. She looked at him with surprise and fear, but also with desperate hope. She tried to speak, but the words came out in a language Jake had never heard before. It sounded like singing mixed with the tinkling of wind chimes. Even though he couldn't understand her words, he could hear the pain in her voice. Jake knelt beside her and examined her wounds. There were 3 deep cuts across her chest, and they were bleeding heavily. The silver blood was pooling beneath her, and Jake could see that she was losing too much too quickly. "I don't know who you are or what happened to you," Jake said gently, "but I'm going to help you." The alien woman looked into his eyes and seemed to understand, even though she couldn't speak his language. She reached out with a shaking hand and touched his face. When her fingers made contact with his skin, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation, like a mild electric shock. Jake looked around the cave for anything he could use to help her, but there was nothing. No medical supplies, no clean water, nothing. He was a soldier, not a doctor. Had basic first aid training, but nothing that would help with wounds this severe. The woman was getting weaker by the minute. Her glowing skin was starting to fade, and her breathing was becoming more labored. Jake realized that she was going to die right there in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But then he remembered something from his military training. In extreme emergency situations, when there was no medical help available, sometimes giving blood to an injured person could buy them a little more time. It was dangerous and rarely worked, but it was better than doing nothing. Jake pulled out his combat knife and looked at the blade. It was clean and sharp. Looked at the dying alien woman, then back at the knife. This was crazy. He had no idea if human blood would help her or make things worse. For all he knew, it could poison her.
Oh.
But he couldn't just watch her die. "I don't know if this will work," Jake said, more to himself than to her, "but I have to try." He made a quick cut across his palm. The pain was sharp but manageable. Red blood immediately began flowing from the wound. Jake positioned his hand over the alien woman's injuries and let his blood drip onto her wounds. At first, nothing happened. Jake watched his blood mix with her silver blood, creating strange, swirling patterns. He was beginning to think he had made a terrible mistake. Then something incredible happened. Where Jake's blood touched her wounds, the cuts began to close. Not completely, but enough to stop the heavy bleeding. The alien woman's skin began to glow brighter, and her breathing became stronger and more steady. But that wasn't the strangest part. As Jake watched his blood heal, her wounds, he started feeling dizzy. Not from blood loss. This was different. It felt like something was connecting in his mind, like a radio tuning into a new station. Suddenly he could hear thoughts that weren't his own. "Thank you," a voice said in his head. The alien woman's voice, but she wasn't speaking out loud. "You have saved my life, brave warrior." Jake stumbled backward, confused and amazed. "Did you just talk to me? In my head?" "Yes," the voice replied. "Your blood has created a bond between us. I can feel your thoughts, and you can feel mine. This should not be possible, but it is happening." The alien woman slowly sat up, her strength returning. She looked at Jake with wonder and gratitude, and she spoke again, both out loud and in his mind. Jake could understand her perfectly. "I am Princess Zara of the Luminari people," she said, her voice like music. "And you, human warrior, have done something that will change both our worlds forever." Jake felt his legs give out, and he sat down hard on the crystal floor. The blood loss was finally catching up to him. But more than that, he was overwhelmed by what had just happened. He had saved an alien princess, and somehow their blood had created a mental connection between them. "I'm Jake," he managed to say. "Just Jake, and I think I'm in way over my head." Princess Zara smiled, and when she did, the crystals around them pulsed brighter. "We both are, Jake, but together we might just survive what comes next." As Jake looked into her star-filled eyes, he realized that his simple patrol mission had turned into something much bigger than he ever could have imagined. He had no idea that this moment would be the beginning of an adventure that would span the galaxy and change the fate of both their species forever. The crystal cave hummed around them as if the planet itself was singing a song of new beginnings. Jake woke up in a place that looked like something out of a dream. The walls around him were made of smooth, glowing crystals that pulsed with soft rainbow colors. The air smelled like fresh rain and flowers he'd never encountered before. For a moment, he forgot where he was and how he got there. Then he remembered everything. The crash, the dying alien princess, the blood bond. "You're awake," came a musical voice from across the room. Princess Zara was sitting on a crystal chair, watching him with those incredible purple eyes. She looked much better now. Her skin was glowing with health, and her silver hair seemed to dance in the light. Jake sat up slowly, feeling surprisingly good for someone who had just crash-landed on an alien planet. "Where are we?" "This place is beautiful. This is my sanctuary," Zara explained, walking over to him. "It's hidden deep beneath the planet's surface. My people built it long ago as a safe place during dangerous times. I brought you here while you were unconscious." "Your people?" Jake looked around the amazing room. "Are there others here?" "Us." Expression grew sad. "No, Jake. I am the last of my kind. The Luminari are gone, except for me." Through their mental connection, Jake could feel her deep loneliness and grief. It hit him like a wave, and for a moment he felt like he might cry. From the overwhelming sadness that wasn't even his own. "I'm sorry," Jake said quietly. "What happened to them?" Zara walked to a wall, covered in glowing symbols. She touched it. The symbols began moving, creating pictures in the air like a holographic movie. Jake watched in amazement as the story unfolded before his eyes. Long ago, the Luminari were the guardians of this part of the galaxy, Zara began. We lived on beautiful worlds filled with light and music. We could heal the sick, bring life to dead planets, and share our thoughts and feelings with each other across vast distances. The images showed cities made of crystal and light, with beings like Zara floating through the air, their hands glowing as they tended to gardens of impossible beauty. It was paradise. But then the Void Hunters came, Zara continued, and the images grew dark. They are creatures of pure hunger. They feed on life force itself, draining entire worlds until nothing remains but empty rock floating in space. Jake watched, horrified, as shadow-like creatures descended on the beautiful Luminari worlds. Wherever they touched, the light went out. Plants withered, water turned black, and the glowing beings fell to the ground, their light fading forever. "Hunted us across the galaxy," Zara said, her voice filled with pain. "World after world fell to them. My people fought bravely, but the Void Hunters grew stronger with each planet they consumed. Finally, only our home world remained." The images showed a desperate last battle. Luminari warriors fighting with weapons made of pure light against creatures that seemed to absorb everything around them. It was a losing fight. My father, the king, made a desperate choice. He and the greatest minds of our people created these crystal caves. They transferred the consciousness, the very souls of our entire civilization, into the crystals. Billions of my people now exist as pure thought and memory, waiting for a way to return. Jake felt his mouth drop open. "You mean all these crystals? They're your people?" "Yes," Zara nodded. "Every crystal in these caves contains the living consciousness of a Luminar. They can think and feel, but they cannot act in the physical world. They are trapped, watching and waiting." Suddenly, Jake understood why the humming sound in the caves had seemed so musical. It wasn't just random noise. It was the voices of an entire civilization trying to communicate. "That's incredible," Jake breathed. "But how does this connect to what happened between us?" Zara turned to face him, and her eyes were shining with something that might have been hope. "Mixed with mine, something impossible happened. Your life force awakened something in me that had been dormant. But more than that, it awakened something in you too." "What do you mean, stand up?" Zara said. "Try to lift that crystal." Jake looked at the crystal she was pointing to. It was about the size of a basketball and looked heavy. "I don't think I can try," Zara interrupted. "But don't use your hands. Use your mind." Jake felt silly, but he focused on the crystal and imagined it lifting into the air. To his complete shock, the crystal began to glow and slowly rose off the ground. He was moving it with his thoughts. "How is this possible?" Jake gasped, letting the crystal float gently back down. "Your blood bond with me has awakened abilities in your DNA that your people forgot they had," Zara explained. "Long ago, humans and Luminari shared the same ancestors. When your people traveled to the far edges of the galaxy, they lost touch with their inner light. But it was always there, sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up." Jake felt a strange tingling throughout his body. It was like every cell was waking up from a long sleep. "You're saying humans are related to your people?" "Not just related," Zara said excitedly. "We are family, separated by time and space, but still connected by the same source of life. Your blood recognized mine because we are children of the same cosmic parents." This was almost too much for Jake to process. He was feeling emotions and sensations he'd never experienced before. He could sense the living consciousness in the crystals around him, feel their hope and excitement at this new development. "There's more," Zara continued. "The bond between us isn't just personal. It sent out a signal across the galaxy. Other humans with dormant abilities are starting to wake up. Your people scattered across the stars are beginning to remember. what they truly are? As if to prove her point, Jake suddenly felt a strange sensation in his mind. It was like hearing distant voices calling his name. Somewhere out there, other humans were experiencing the same awakening he was going through. But there's danger too, Zara said, her expression becoming serious. The Void Hunters can sense the awakening. They thought they had destroyed all trace of luminary power in the galaxy. Now they know there are others who carry the light, and they're coming. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Coming here? Yes, they're already on their way. The same bond that awakened your abilities has also revealed our location to them. We have maybe a day before they arrive. Then we need to get out of here, Jake said, standing up. Can your ship fly? Yes, but running isn't the answer, Zara replied. If we run, they'll just follow us. And eventually they'll find other humans who are awakening. They'll drain the life from every world until there's nothing left but darkness. Jake felt her determination through their bond. She wasn't planning to run. She was planning to fight. What are you suggesting? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. We make a stand, Zara said firmly. We use the consciousness of my people stored in these crystals, combined with your newly awakened abilities, to face the Void Hunters. It's our only chance to save both our species. Jake looked around at the glowing crystals, each one containing the soul of a luminari. Could feel their hope, their willingness to fight one last time for the chance to live again. And through his bond with Zara, he could feel something else, the awakening of humans across the galaxy. People like him who were discovering they were so much more than they ever imagined. You're right, Jake said finally. We can't run. We're going to do this. We need to do it together. Zara smiled, and when she did, every crystal in the sanctuary pulsed with bright light. The consciousness of an entire civilization was ready to fight again. And this time, they wouldn't be alone. Jake could feel the power growing inside him, abilities he never knew he possessed. Tomorrow, they would face an enemy that had destroyed countless worlds. But tonight, for the first time in ages, there was hope burning bright in the darkness. The galaxy was about to discover that the light of the luminari had never truly died. It had just been waiting for the right moment to shine. Again, the sanctuary shook violently, and chunks of crystal fell from the ceiling. Jake grabbed Zara's hand as they both struggled to stay on their feet. Through their mental connection, he could feel her fear mixed with determination. They're here, Zara whispered, her eyes wide with terror. The Void Hunters found us faster than I thought they would. Jake looked around the beautiful crystal chamber that had become their home. The glowing walls were now flickering like dying light bulbs, and the musical humming of the luminary consciousness was turning into screams of panic. We need to go, now, Jake said, pulling Zara toward what looked like a tunnel entrance. Pause. Your ship. This way, Zara said, leading him through a maze of crystal corridors. As they ran, Jake could hear something terrible happening above them. It sounded like the planet itself was being torn apart. They reached a hidden chamber where a sleek silver ship waited. It was unlike anything Jake had ever seen, curved and elegant, like it had been grown rather than built. Strange symbols glowed along its surface, pulsing in rhythm with Zara's heartbeat. I've never flown an alien ship before, Jake said as they climbed aboard. You won't need to learn, Zara replied, touching a crystal panel. The ship will respond. To your thoughts now, the blood bond has awakened your genetic memory. You already know how to fly this. Jake settled into the pilot's seat, and suddenly he did know. Information flooded his mind, not learned, but remembered. His hands moved over the controls like he'd been flying Luminari's ships his whole life. The ship hummed to life and lifted. Smoothly into the air, they burst out of the planet's surface just as the Void Hunters finished their terrible work. Jake had never seen anything so horrifying. The beautiful crystal formations were gone, replaced by twisted black metal that seemed to absorb light itself. The creatures were massive, like living shadows with burning red eyes that left trails of darkness wherever they looked. My people, Zara whispered, tears streaming down her face. They're destroying the crystals. All those souls. ... Jake felt her anguish through their bond, but he also felt something else: anger. These creatures had destroyed an entire civilization, and now they were doing it again. He pushed the ship's engines to maximum power, racing away from the dying planet. "Where can we go?" Jake asked. "They'll just follow us anywhere we run." "There's one place," Zara said, wiping her tears. "The Great Library on Kethmorin. An ancient world where the first civilization in the galaxy kept all their knowledge. If there's an answer anywhere, it's there." They flew through space for hours, the ship moving faster than Jake thought possible. Behind them, he could see the dark shapes of Void Hunter ships giving chase, but they were falling behind. The Luminari ship was faster than anything the creatures had. As they traveled, Jake began experiencing strange flashes of memory that weren't his own. He saw himself as a child, but the child wasn't human. He was playing in fields of crystal flowers under a purple sky, his skin glowing with inner light. He was Luminari, but he was also somehow still himself. "These memories," Jake said to Zara, "they feel so real." "They are real," she explained. "They're your genetic memories awakening. Long ago, before your people traveled to the outer edges of the galaxy, they lived alongside mine. You're remembering what it was like to be whole." The planet Kethmorin appeared ahead of them, a massive world covered in structures that looked like they were made of solidified starlight. The Great Library was a city-sized building that spiraled up into the clouds, its walls covered in writing. That seemed to move and change as Jake watched. They landed in a courtyard filled with statues of beings Jake didn't recognize. Tall, graceful creatures with multiple arms and eyes that seemed to follow their movement. The air was thin and cold, and everything was covered in a layer of dust that looked like it had been there for thousands of years. "This place feels ancient," Jake said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "It is," Zara replied. "The Primarchs built this library before any of our civilizations existed. They were the first beings to achieve consciousness in this galaxy, and they recorded everything they learned before they ... moved on to whatever comes next." They walked through massive halls filled with floating books that wrote themselves, walls covered in symbols that glowed when Jake looked at them, and pools of liquid that showed moving pictures of distant worlds. Jake had never imagined that so much knowledge could exist in one place. "What are we looking for?" Jake asked. "The truth about the Void Hunters," Zara said, "and the truth about the connection between your people and mine." They were looking for in the deepest part of the library, in a chamber that required both of them to open. Jake placed his hand on one crystal panel, while Zara touched another. The room lit up with information that appeared directly in their minds, rather than on walls or screens. The truth was incredible. Millions of years ago, the Luminari had been explorers and teachers, spreading life and consciousness throughout the galaxy. They had discovered a young species on a distant world, early humans who showed remarkable potential for growth and adaptation. The Luminari had shared their knowledge with humanity, helping them develop abilities that would let them survive in the harsh conditions of space, but something had gone wrong. A group of Luminari had become obsessed with power and immortality. They had tried to consume the life force of other beings to make themselves stronger, becoming the first Void Hunters. The other Luminari had fought them, but the damage was done. The corrupted ones had been banished to the dark spaces between stars, where they fed on cosmic energy and grew stronger. To protect the young human species, the Luminari had hidden them on a distant world called Earth, suppressing their abilities and erasing their memories of their cosmic heritage. The humans would be safe there, the Luminari thought, hidden away, until they were ready to reclaim their birthright. "We're not just related," Jake said, his mind reeling from the revelation. "Your people created mine. We're your children." "Yes." Zara nodded. "And now the Void Hunters want to finish what they started. They want to consume all consciousness in the galaxy, including the humans they see as failed experiments." But there was more. The library showed them something called the Convergence, a prophecy that spoke of a time when the scattered children of the Luminari would reunite with their cosmic parents. The mixing of human and Luminari blood would create a new kind of being, one with the strength to face the darkness that threatened all life. "That's us," Jake realized. We're the beginning of the convergence. Before Zara could respond, the library shook with a familiar rumble. The Void Hunters had found them. Through the crystal windows, Jake could see their ships descending like a swarm of mechanical insects, each one trailing darkness behind it. "They're trying to destroy the library," Zara said, her face pale. "All this knowledge, all these memories of civilizations that came before us, they want to erase everything." Jake felt something building inside him, a power he'd never experienced before. His anger at the Void Hunters was mixing with the awakening abilities in his blood, creating something new and incredible. Energy crackled around his hands, and he could feel the vast consciousness of the library itself responding to his presence. "Not today," Jake said, his voice carrying an authority he didn't know he possessed. "Today we fight back." But as the Void Hunters broke through the library's defenses, Jake realized that fighting back might cost them everything. The creatures were more powerful than ever, and there were so many of them. Even with his new abilities and Zara's ancient knowledge, they might not be strong enough to survive. The battle for the fate of all consciousness in the galaxy was about to begin. And Jake could only hope that the blood bond between him and Zara would be enough to tip the scales toward the light. The great library exploded into chaos as the Void Hunters poured through the broken walls like a flood of living darkness. Jake watched in horror as these creatures touched the ancient books and knowledge pools, instantly turning them into lifeless ash. Thousands of years of wisdom was disappearing in seconds. "We have to save the core records," Zara shouted over the terrible noise of destruction. "If they destroy the central memory bank, entire civilizations will be forgotten forever." Jake felt power surging through his body like electricity. His hands were glowing with the same blue light as the crystals back on Zara's planet. Without thinking, he raised his arms and created a shield of pure energy around them. The Void Hunters crashed into it like waves against a rock, their red eyes burning with fury. "How did I do that?" Jake gasped, amazed by his own abilities. "You're becoming what you were always meant to be," Zara said, her own hands glowing, as she fought off the creatures trying to break through his shield. "But this is just the beginning. We need to reach the heart of the library." They fought their way deeper into the building, Jake's newfound powers growing stronger with each passing moment. He could move objects with his mind, create barriers of light, and somehow sense exactly where the Void Hunters would attack next. It was like playing a video game where he suddenly knew all the cheat codes. But there were so many enemies. For every Void Hunter they stopped, 10 more appeared. Jake was getting tired, and he could feel Zara weakening beside him. Through their bond, he sensed her determination, but also her growing despair. "There are too many of them," Zara said, breathing hard. "They're going to overwhelm us." That's when Jake saw their leader. The creature was massive, easily 3 times the size of the others. Where the regular Void Hunters looked like living shadows, this one seemed to be made of pure nightmare. Its eyes burned like dying stars, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like the screams of 1,000 worlds. "Princess Zara," the creature said, its words dripping with ancient hatred. "You and your pet human have caused us much trouble. But this ends now." "Commander Vex," Zara whispered, her face going pale. "I thought you were destroyed long ago." "Destroyed?" The creature laughed, a sound that made Jake's skin crawl. "I am stronger than ever. You know how many civilizations I have consumed? Since our last meeting? How many worlds I have drained of life?" Jake felt Zara's terror through their connection. This wasn't just any Void Hunter. This was the one who had led the attack on her homeworld, the one who had forced her people to hide their souls in crystals. "You will watch as I drain every last bit of knowledge from this library," Commander Vex continued. "And then I will consume you both, adding your life force to my own. The last of the Luminari will finally be mine." The creature raised its arms, and Jake felt an incredible pulling sensation, like something was trying to rip his soul out of his body. Beside him, Zara cried out in pain as her own life force began to flow toward the monster. Jake tried to fight back, but his powers seemed useless against this thing. It was too strong, too ancient, too full of the stolen life force of countless beings. He could feel his own energy being drained away, leaving him weak and helpless. That's when Zara made her choice. "No," she said firmly, standing up despite the agony she was in. "I won't let you hurt him." Before Jake could stop her, Zara placed her hands on his chest and began transferring her own life force directly into him. Through their blood bond, her power flowed into his body, making him stronger than he'd ever been. But Jake could feel what it was costing her. She was giving him everything she had. "Zara, stop!" Jake shouted. "You're going to die. This is the only way," she said, her voice growing weaker. "You need to be strong enough to finish this. My people's consciousness is still trapped in the crystal matrix we brought from home. Use my power to free them." Jake felt Zara's life force merging with his own, and suddenly he understood everything. The crystal matrix wasn't just a storage device, it was a weapon. All those millions of Luminari souls waiting in the crystals could be released at once. But it required more power than any one person could provide. That's what the blood bond was really for. It wasn't just about creating a connection between their species. It was about creating someone strong enough to carry the combined power of all the Luminari who had ever lived. As Zara's strength flowed into him, Jake felt his consciousness expanding. He could sense humans all across the galaxy, on Earth, on distant colonies, on ships traveling between the stars, and they were all changing. The awakening that had started with him and Zara was spreading like wildfire, unlocking abilities that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. "What's happening?" Commander Vex roared, his confidence turning to fear as he sensed the change. Jake stood up, his entire body now glowing with the combined light of two civilizations. Zara collapsed beside him, barely conscious but still alive. The crystal matrix they had brought from her homeworld began to pulse with incredible energy. "You'd one mistake," Jake said, his voice echoing with the power of billions of souls. "You thought the Luminari were gone, but they're not. They're just waiting for someone to set them free." Jake reached out with his enhanced abilities and touched the crystal matrix. Instantly, it exploded with light that filled the entire library. The consciousness of every Luminari who had ever lived poured out of the crystals, their combined knowledge and power flowing through Jake's connection to humans across the galaxy. On Earth, a young woman named Beth suddenly found herself able to heal her sick grandmother with just a touch. On a mining station near Jupiter, a man called Rico discovered he could see through solid rock to find precious metals. On an exploration ship heading toward distant stars, Captain Torres realized she could communicate with alien life forms they had never been able to understand before. All across human space, people were discovering they had abilities beyond their wildest dreams. But more than that, they were remembering. Deep genetic memories were awakening, showing them glimpses of their true heritage as children of the stars. Commander Vex tried to drain this new power, but there was too much of it. The combined life force of two civilizations spread across billions of human minds was more than even he could consume. "This is impossible," he shrieked, his form beginning to waver and fade. "No," Jake said, feeling the strength of every awakened human flowing through him. "This is justice." But the effort was taking everything Jake had. Even with Zara's power added to his own, maintaining this level of energy was burning him out. He could feel his body starting to fail, his life force stretched too thin across too many connections. He looked down at Zara, who was watching him with proud but worried eyes. "Jake," she whispered, "you're doing too much. You need to stop. Before it destroys you." "I can't stop now," Jake replied. "This is our only chance. Our people are finally free, but someone needs to guide them. Someone needs to show them how to use their gifts." Commander Vex made one last desperate attack, pouring all his stolen power into a final assault on Jake's mind. The pain was incredible, like having his thoughts set on fire. But Jake held on, drawing strength from every human who was discovering their true nature. "Together," he said, speaking not just to Zara, but to every awakened human in the galaxy, "we're stronger together." The light that exploded from the Great Library could be seen from orbit. When it faded, Commander Vex was gone, destroyed by the very power he had tried to steal. The other Void Hunters fled in terror, their leaders, destruction sending waves of fear through their ranks. Jake collapsed next to Zara, both of them barely alive but victorious. Around them, the great library was healing itself. The knowledge that had been destroyed beginning to reform as the released luminary consciousness restored what had been lost. "We did it," Zara whispered, taking Jake's hand. "Yeah," Jake replied, squeezing her fingers gently. "But this is just the beginning. Our people are awake now. Both our peoples. And they're going to need someone to help them figure out what comes next." Through their bond, Jake could feel the questions and excitement. Of billions of newly awakened humans, the galaxy would never be the same again. The children of the stars had finally come home. 3 months had passed since the battle at the Great Library, and the galaxy was a completely different place. Jake stood on the observation deck of the massive space station that had become the new center of human luminary cooperation. Ships arrived from every corner of known space. These weren't just human ships anymore. People had learned to grow vessels from living crystal, just like the Luminari had done. The ships pulsed with organic light and could heal themselves when damaged. It was beautiful and strange to see technology that was alive. "Still can't believe how much everything has changed," Jake said to Zara, who was standing beside him. She had recovered from their battle, though she was still weaker than before. The life force she had given him had created a permanent connection between them that grew stronger every day. "Look at that ship." Zara pointed to a vessel that looked like a giant flower made of metal and crystal. "That's from the Europa colony. 6 months ago, those people didn't even know they had abilities. Now they're building things that would have taken my people centuries to develop." Through their mental link, Jake could feel Zara's amazement and pride. Humans weren't just copying Luminari technology, they were improving it, combining it with their own creativity and engineering skills to make something entirely new. A soft chime filled the air, signaling that another group of awakened humans had arrived. Jake and Zara made their way to the docking bay, where they were greeted by a sight that never got old. People discovering their abilities for the first time. There was Beth, the young woman from Earth who had learned to heal with her touch. She was now leading a team of medical specialists who could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Beside her stood Rico, the miner from the asteroid. Belt, who could see through solid rock, it found more precious metals in the past 3 months than humanity had discovered in the previous 100 years. Jake Zara, called Captain Torres, the explorer who had gained the ability to communicate with alien life forms. "You need to see what we found." She led them to a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Dozens of new civilizations were marked in green species that Torres and her team had made contact with for the first time. "It turns out we weren't alone after all," Torres explained excitedly. "There are hundreds of intelligent species out there. They were just hiding, afraid of the Void Hunters. But now that word has spread about what happened at the library. They're coming out of hiding." Jake felt a surge of hope. The galaxy wasn't the empty, dangerous place they had thought. It was full of life, just waiting for the chance to flourish again. "That's not even the best part," Beth added, her eyes shining with excitement. "Some of these species remember the old days when the Luminari were the guardians of peace. They want to rebuild that alliance, but with humans as equal partners this time." Over the following weeks, Jake found himself at the center of something he never could have imagined. Representatives from dozens of different worlds arrived at the station, all wanting to be part of what people were calling the New Alliance. There were beings made of living crystal like the Luminari, others that looked like walking trees, some that existed as pure energy contained in mechanical bodies. But the most surprising visitors were other humans, ones who had been scattered to distant parts of the galaxy, so long ago that they had developed into entirely different cultures. Some lived underwater on ocean worlds and could breathe liquid. Others had adapted to high-gravity planets and were incredibly strong. A few had been living in space so long they could survive in vacuum without suits. "We're not just one species anymore," Jake realized, during a meeting with representatives from 30 different human colonies. "We're like a whole family of related species, each one adapted to different environments." "It's exactly what we are," agreed Dr. Chen, a scientist from the Titan Research Station who had gained the ability to understand any language instantly. "The Luminari didn't just hide humans on Earth, they spread us across the galaxy to make sure we would survive no matter what happened." As the months passed, Jake watched the new alliance grow stronger. The different species shared their knowledge, freely creating technologies and solutions that none of them could have developed alone. Planets that had been barren for centuries began to bloom with new life. Diseases were cured, hunger was eliminated, and for the first time in galactic history, war became unnecessary because there was enough of everything for everyone. But there was still the question of the remaining Void Hunters. Commander Vex had been destroyed, but there were others scattered throughout the dark spaces between stars. They were weaker now, confused and afraid without their leader, but they were still dangerous. We can't just hunt them down, Zara said during a strategy meeting that would make us know better than they are. Then what do you suggest? Asked General Lopez, one of the military leaders who had developed the ability to coordinate multiple battles across vast distances. Jake had been thinking about this problem for weeks. Through his connection to the awakened humans, he could sense the Void Hunters out there in the darkness, feeding on cosmic radiation and growing slowly stronger. But he had also learned something important from the Great Library's records. The Void Hunters weren't always monsters, Jake said. Were Luminari once, just like Zara's people? They became what they are because they lost hope, because they thought consuming others was the only way to survive. You want to try to cure them? Dr. Chen asked in amazement. Want to give them a choice? Jake replied. Show them that there's another way to live. If we can heal the damage done to their consciousness, maybe they can remember what they used to be. It was the most dangerous mission anyone had ever attempted. Jake and Zara, along with volunteers from every species in the new alliance, traveled to the dark regions where the Void Hunters had been hiding. Instead of weapons, they carried healing crystals and devices designed to repair damaged consciousness. The first encounter almost ended in disaster. The Void Hunters attacked immediately, trying to drain the life force from the rescue team. But something unexpected happened. When the healing energy touched them, instead of being destroyed, the creatures began to remember. Jake watched in amazement as one of the Void Hunters slowly transformed back into its original form, a Luminari, but one that had been twisted by eons of hunger and despair. The being collapsed, overwhelmed by the return of emotions it had forgotten. It could feel. I remember, the former Void Hunter whispered in a voice like wind chimes. I remember the light. I remember hope. It took years, but eventually, every surviving Void Hunter was given the chance to choose redemption over destruction. Most of them chose to return to the light, becoming part of the new alliance and using their knowledge of the dark spaces to help protect other civilizations. A few refused, preferring to fade away into the cosmic void rather than face the pain of remembering what they had lost. Jake felt sad for them, but he understood. Some wounds were too deep to heal, and forcing someone to live with that pain wasn't mercy. 10 years after that first meeting in the Crystal Cave, Jake stood once again on an observation deck. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him was his and Zara's daughter, Kira, who had inherited abilities from both her parents. She could heal, like the Luminary, and innovate like humans, but she also had something entirely new: the ability to help different species, to understand each other on a level deeper than language. Dad, look! Kira pointed to a nearby planet where the surface was covered in cities that looked like gardens. The tree people and the crystal beings are building something together. Jake smiled, watching as two completely different species worked side by side to create something beautiful. This was what the future looked like. Not one dominant civilization ruling over others, but countless different peoples, sharing their gifts to make something better than any of them could achieve alone. What do you think, Zara? Jake asked. Through their mental connection, did we do okay? Zara's response came filled with love and contentment. We did more than okay, Jake. We gave the galaxy hope. And hope, it turns out, is the most powerful force in the universe. As Jake watched ships from 100 different worlds traveling peacefully through space, he realized that sometimes the most incredible journeys begin with the simplest act of kindness. All it had taken was one human willing to give his blood, to save a dying stranger, and that single moment of compassion had changed everything. The galaxy was finally at peace, and it was more beautiful than anyone had ever dared to dream.